Hello, good afternoon. I understand we are almost heading at the end of this
you've got the microphone there, or
this
stand
special conference, so I hope you're not too tired for this session. And I think Arik has very well framed the issue of our discussion this afternoon, and that is really the question of state-based regulatory system versus a voluntary or a press council kind of non-statutory regulation. Not only is any one of them a necessary evil, but is it truly a zero-sum game? Is it truly the case that the more responsible we are, the less aggressive the legislature will be, and vice versa? And I hope that during the afternoon we'll have the privilege of drawing on the experience and the research done by people both in this country and in other places, and try to understand a bit more about this issue. I would like now to invite our keynote speaker, Mrs. Lorena Boix-Alonso. She's head of Unit for Converging Media and Content in the European Commission. We will hear her remarks and then embark on the discussion. Please, Lorena.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. So, to legislate or not to legislate, that is, from my point of view, not the question. The question from our point of view, at least at the European Commission, is not whether there should be legislation or not. That's too simplistic. The only thing we are worried about is, you want to see me?
Yeah, absolutely, I want to see you.
What we want to make sure is how to best ensure freedom of expression in Europe. By, on the one hand, protecting the rights of the media against government or economic interference, but on the other hand, protecting the rights of public interest and in particular individuals against any possible abuse by the media. And I think the difficulty is how to find the right balance between these two interests. And honestly, as we don't have much competences in this field, well, what we observe is that you find different characteristics in regulatory systems, whether they are legislative or not, that point more to one direction or the other. And you can find, well, the role of the statutory, of course. What we always say is that to protect the media against government interference, of course, is to keep government as far away as possible. At the same time, individuals claim that to protect the right from any abuse of the media, the best thing is to keep the media as far away as possible. So you have this balance to make. In some countries, I see press councils fix it by including the public or independent parties in the board of the press council. You have also the role of funding. Should there be funding from the government or not? The role of who can complain to a press council. Should it be only the person affected or any member of the public? And what you see is that in each country it is fixed in a different way. You just find the balance in a different system. I suppose that most of you in this room will have seen this recent study by Reuters Institute that does this analysis of the best in class, the best in class according to them. But I was checking the rankings of NGOs on degree of media pluralism, and it matches quite well with the countries that they have identified as doing well, as the best in class. And it's interesting to see how they go into the regulatory systems, and even if they are all doing very well, they have very different systems. You may have in Denmark a statutory system, but only the affected can complain, or in Germany only industry in the board, but there is financing from the government. So you have, in fact, different balances. So now, you may be very happy to hear the Commission saying, well, just fix it your way, that's fine, we will not put our hands in whatever you do. Yeah, maybe you're right. But what I was talking, it's about the best in class. But there's something that we are worried about, and are those that are not best in class. And unfortunately, in the European Union, you have member states where there are problems of media pluralism. And it's a pity. We are supposed all to be developed and mature democracies, but that's not what we are observing. I think it's very well known to you, the case of Hungary. This is how all started, at least our interest in this field. As far as I'm concerned, I was working at the time for Commissioner Nelly Cruz, that many of you may have heard about. And in 2011, we had this issue of one of our member states trying to pass a draft law regulating the media that honestly was not very respectful of media pluralism in certain aspects. What did we do? Well, the whole world was looking at us. What are you going to do about it? And we tried to do what we could. And what we could was to use the tools we have, which are not very much, not very many. I don't know if the colleague of the Council of Europe is there, because we had a very good cooperation in this case. What we did, and I was, in fact, myself dealing with it, I was negotiating with Hungary at the time, is to use the tool we have, which is the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. We do have a directive at EU level legislating audiovisual. So we could tackle some of the issues by saying, well, you are not respecting this, because there we do have provisions. I mean, some of examples where they were trying to introduce an authorization system to be able to even have blog online, or to introduce a requirement of balanced coverage for this type of online activity. So we managed to get them change the law, but there was a limit to what we could do. Then there were certain provisions that were dealing purely with the press that we couldn't deal with. Then the Council of Europe intervened and tried also to have it fix it. You managed to a certain extent as well. There are still issues, at least according to the European Parliament that adopted a report only in July. There are still issues. One of them, for example, being the lack of independence of the audiovisual regulator, which is a converged regulator, by the way. So, unfortunately, Hungary is not the only country where there are complaints about problems. We have, for example, Romania, where the Commission verification report, we have a report to still check how things are going, even if it's already a member state, have identified issues of pressures on the judiciary and lack of independence of the audiovisual regulator. In Bulgaria, we have plenty of NGOs always complaining of excessive media concentration or lack of transparency. So these things are happening. And you may think that all is well and that you have wonderful press councils, but you have to realize that there are countries where this is not happening. Another question is what to do. I mean, what is it for us? Should the Commission do something about it? Should we legislate? Should we intervene? According to the European Parliament, we should do more. According to certain NGOs, we should do more as well. But we have the competences we have, and maybe we don't have to do more. But the problem is there. So I'm going to, I'll tell you what we are doing. But I would like to clarify something. When it is asked to the Commission to intervene, or when the Commission intervenes, doesn't necessarily mean that the Commission is going to legislate. The Commission is doing plenty of things that have nothing to do with legislation, where we are not honestly interested in legislation. We don't think it's the right way, or we do it in a different way. We are, for example, already funding a lot of research in this field. We are funding studies, trainings. I was discussing with a colleague from UNESCO. We are funding trainings on these matters, and that honestly is not legislating. Even in when we legislate, for example, I was mentioning we do have a directive on audiovisual. It's the first directive, well, the e-commerce does it as well, where we do insist that self-regulation is very important. and that we are not going to fix everything. We are going to fix certain things, certain minimum things, but we encourage a lot self-regulation. And in the area of advertising, where we are legislating, there's a lot of self-regulation going on, and we even promote it. So, now, what did we do at the time when we managed to change certain things in Hungary, but not all? We had a lot of people saying, so, well, you didn't fix it all. So this is when Commissioner Cruz decided to launch this independent report. She appointed a group of experts, completely independent of the Commission, to draft a report to tell us what we should do in this type of situations where the whole Parliament and the citizens are looking at us. And, well, we had this report, which was a big report that was going much beyond this matter, what the Commission should do. Because honestly, there are 30 recommendations in this report, and only a few are addressed to the Commission. Most of them are addressed to Member States and to the media themselves. Now, I'm not going through all the 30 recommendations, don't worry, I will end soon, but I'm going to highlight some of them. For example, some that were of a lot of interest to the Commission. We have recommendation 1, which is the one we were all waiting for. This is a general recommendation on how the Commission should deal with situations where governments in the European Union are doing things that are considered as contrary to media pluralism. And here what the expert said is, you have more competences than you think, and you should act more within the field of competences you have. So the report never said you should have more competences or we should change the treaty. No, it just said use it better. For example, and that's also, sorry, I'm always mentioning Hungary, but there was there was recently a constitutional change that I'm sure the colleague of the Council of Europe knows as well, trying to pass some articles, well, they were passed, by the way, on political advertising during campaigns, electoral campaigns. And it was basically saying, well, private broadcaster cannot publicize. So that was, of course, very worrying to us. And the first reaction is, do we have any competence here at all? It's about elections in a member state. Oh, well, we thought we had, because elections are not only elections at national level, but elections at the European Parliament. And that can have an influence in the democratic process. So this is how negotiations started and are going very well, by the way. So Hungary is working on changing this. So that was an important recommendation to us. We have another recommendation which is very important, which was to say, Commission, you have to here legislate and impose on member states that they have an independent audiovisual regulator. There we have regulators. And we have in data protection, in telecoms, in these fields, in energy even, legislation imposes on member states that they have an authority and it is independent. We don't have it for audiovisual. And the request was to say, you should introduce this type of article as well. We would have fixed some problems. Another recommendation that was interesting to us was to create a monitoring tool. So you don't have to do anything, but at least monitor what's going on. But don't do it yourself, Commission, and trust an independent body to do it for you. And that there are reports to the Parliament. And this is happening, by the way. This is happening not because we decided, but the European Parliament voted and gave us some money to carry out this task. So we are this is starting already. We have entrusted an independent body to, it's a pilot for the moment, monitor the situation at member state level. And also we launched yesterday a call for tender for an independent institution to act as a center for journalists that have issues, so a kind of one-stop shop. That was also a request of the Parliament, so the tender was published yesterday. And voila, so these are the recommendations that were more to us, to the Commission. But there were some that were more to you, to media councils and to journalists. One of them was recommendation 21, which was asking member states to ensure that there is legislation to protect journalistic sources. I must say I was surprised. I thought they all had it, but it seems there are member states that still are not in the European Union protecting journalistic sources. There was another recommendation that was saying that all media organizations should follow codes of conduct and should publish them. So that was another recommendation. And then came, of course, recommendation 4, which is the most polemic one, and that I will read because it created so much fuss among the press, and you were so critical that I think I can only read it to objectively report on it. The recommendation says all EU countries should have independent media councils with a politically and culturally balanced and socially diverse membership. All well up here. Nominations to them should be transparent with built-in checks and balances. Seems okay. Such bodies would have competences to investigate complaints, much like a media ombudsman, but would also check that media organizations have published a code of conduct and have revealed ownership details, declarations of conflicts of interest, etc. Media councils should have real enforcement powers, such as the imposition of fines, orders for printed or broadcast apologies, or removal of journalistic status. Here, you start to worry. And then came the last sentence. The national media councils should follow a set of European-wide standards and be monitored by the Commission to ensure that they comply with European values. And here you exploded. And here we had, we published a report. I know, and I understand. The report was published, and despite the wonderful things that the report said on other things, the headlines were, the Commission is going to legislate the press. These were the headlines for 3-4 days. We were, of course, under almost a heart attack because this sentence, of course, first of all, it was an independent report. And I can tell you, I participated to 2 of the meetings. I can tell you this woman was really independent. So they wrote what they wanted, and we had not even paid attention because we were more worried about the other things I was telling before. We were worried about governments trying to influence media pluralism, and we were not really looking at media councils. I had never looked at this issue, to be honest. So we had all this press, and what did we do? Well, it was a bit sad, I must say, because the intent was good. And then we got a completely negative reaction from the people we wanted to protect. But okay, that's the freedom of expression, so wonderful. So what we did is to say, okay, before deciding on any follow-up on this, let's make a public consultation. Let's put the report out there, and you tell us what you think about it. So we launched 2 public consultations. One more specific, because we were very interested in this one, which was the one proposing legislation on the independence of audiovisual regulators. So that was a separate one, because if it were to be positive, then we could very quickly change a simple article of a directive, and we would fix it. We announced at the time in that public consultation that this was the only field where right now the Commission saw any need to legislate. So that was stated in the public consultation. And then we launched a separate one on the whole report to see on every recommendation what you tell us. Now, I'm very sad to tell you that I cannot yet report on the outcome, even if the consultations were closed. I can report on the outcome of the first one, on the audiovisual regulators, which is overwhelmingly positive. So we have like more than 90% of the reply saying, please do it. The only opposition comes from, there's one member state that opposed, which is France, sadly. And we know from past we have tried this in the past, and Germany has normally been against as well. But then we had reactions from other countries that are very worried about subsidiarity, but that were quite fair, like the Netherlands, for example, that said, listen, in my country there's no problem. And honestly, I don't think you have to do anything, but we understand that you may have problems in other countries, so we will not oppose to whatever you do. So this we are assessing. Of course, we are at a very bad moment. We are at the end of a mandate of the Commission. It's always very difficult to come with any legislative proposal right now. So we will see whether we do something, we do nothing, or we do it and wait for the next Parliament, next Commission. On the high-level group report, their results are public, so everything is on our website, but it's taking us a lot of time to assess because it's more than 450 replies. And so what's next to be seen? What I was trying to explore as well, and this is probably the reason why I'm here, was precisely because of this reaction you had to this particular clause on press councils. Suddenly we became very interested in the subject and realized that indeed this is a very good solution to have press councils, but we don't have any intention to set any standard on press councils, honestly. But an idea that floated is to say, well, maybe these press councils that are working well could talk to the people in those member states where there is not press councils, no tradition, to try to exchange best practices to do something. And this is how I ended up here, because I was trying to find out whether these gatherings existed already, and finally got invited. Maybe it would have been better that you invited me last year. I would have explained the report, because I know you were discussing these matters, but okay. So I cannot end this speech by saying you what will be the future. We are still analyzing, but any idea you have about it is most welcome. Thank you very much. It's not me. No.
You know, Lord Hunt, who was with us until this morning and had to leave early, I think he was the one who said 2 years ago when the scandal broke out in the UK and they started discussing legislation, it says, the road to legislative hell is paved with good parliamentary intentions. Be careful.
And I guess that the road to parliamentary hell is blocked with self-regulatory intentions. I think that Lorena has given us a great point of departure. I thought of telling her köszönöm, which is thank you in Hungarian, but I have the Hungarian representative already wanted to give us a remark. Please. Ilona, right?
Ilona Moritz, yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Ilona Moritz. I am from the Center for Independent Journalism in Hungary, which is not a self-regulatory body, but it was very instrumental to set up the Hungarian Editors Forum, which is a self-regulatory association of chief editors. And I would like to add a few things to what was said by Lorena now, and also call your attention to the paper I brought and would like to distribute as many as possible. Since Hungary, the developments in Hungary led to the attention be focused on regulation in media in general. Probably not only the Hungarian developments, but it was also very important from this point of view. What we do now in Hungary with an alliance of NGOs specializing in media development and human rights. On one hand, we formulated our opinion for the public consultations and sent it to the European Commission. And it really showed that we saw exactly the narrow scope of competence of the European Commission, and also the, I would say, weaker than expected response of the Council of Europe to the developments in Hungary. So we would like to continue this work, as we think that it's just a beginning of the a more serious work on what we could do to change the situation. And we would like to have a concept on key media issues elaborated in a few months, based on an industry and based on the consultations with the industry and also with other stakeholders. Of course, it's not our immediate aim to change legislation, because I think at this point it would be very unrealistic. But we would like to put a paper on the table that can be used by any political, any parliament when or if changing legislation or if taking any measures that affect media. So in the upcoming few weeks, I would like to ask your help also, because we would like to send out certain very specific questions about what should be regulated, what shouldn't be, and as you may see, we have our opinion on this, but we are people from NGOs, and we will have also other opinions from the media, from journalists, from media researchers gathered in Hungary. So we will also try to inform you about what we think, how we could address real issues of media. We are not, our aim is not to react on what has happened in Hungary, but to address issues that the changing media brings up. What it would be good to have in Hungary, how we could have redress the prestige, redress the economy of the media and have it more independent. So thank you very much, and that was all I wanted to add. So
Thank you very much, Ilona. In defense of Hungary. I'd like now to invite three esteemed colleagues and to apologize for a fourth one who is not able to come. But first of all, I want to invite Dr. Nachman Shai. He is a member of the Israeli Knesset, representative of the Labour Party. He was, I think, able to note major dynamics and influences and changes within Israeli media, both as chief of the Israeli Army Radio, where I served as a soldier also. Then he was spokesman of the IDF in some of the most critical times in this country. Then he served as the first CEO of the second authority for radio and TV, laying the regulatory foundations for commercial television in Israel. And just recently he published a book about media war. For the last 4 years, as member of Knesset, he had the unique, I guess, the unique perspective, watching us, the press, from the legislature's bench. Mr. Didier Appelbaum, our colleague from France, please. Didier has long been a television journalist on French television. He is the author of several books, also on the Middle East conflict. He has a PhD in history and teaches journalism in the School of Journalism and took part in some heroic attempts to establish a press council in France. And I want to invite also Ms. Adeline Ulin, who will share with us not only the European experience, but her perspective following an extensive research that she has conducted with regard to press councils in the different countries. We'll make some room for you, Adeline.
Yeah.
And you know, I was listening to Lorena, and by the way, I was astonished by the furious reaction that you were describing. And I think that when we try to assess the prospects or the benefits of self-regulatory media, of press councils and media councils, perhaps we should first ask, from your experience and from your research, is it a zero-sum game? Is it the truth that the more we regulate ourselves, the less they will regulate us?
Yeah, so this is a bit a difficult position for me, because I have to say I speak on two sides. On one side is UNESCO right now, where I promote press councils and their work. And then I also wanted to present the results of a survey, of a PhD actually, I'm about to defend it, where I have been studying the self-regulation mechanism and their impact on media freedom during the last almost 7 years. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you, because you replied all my questionnaires and all my questions, and it was really interesting survey. So when I saw the discussion of this panel, for me the question is more, is there an ideal form of media regulation? And I have to say, after all these years of research, there is no ideal form of media regulation. It really doesn't matter. It depends always the risk of being abused by the one who have put it in place. If it has been put in place by governments, it carries the risk that media freedom will be abused by governments. It's put in place by journalists and the industry. It always carries the risk to become corporatist and to defend the interests of the journalist and not the one of the civil society. So an ideal form of media regulation should be the one that defends best media freedom, but also the right of the civil society to be informed. And knowing that there is some problem in both sides, the question is that is a co-regulation system then a best regulation system? Because from both sides having, well, the thing is that there is often some misunderstanding that self-regulation doesn't replace media regulation, that we will always need some media regulation, like media laws, the basic standards to defend media freedom, to protect sources, to protect journalists in their work, but also to set the standards, like what you cannot do as a journalist. And then self-regulation is in addition coming just to set the additional standards. And here in this room, I don't want to spend a lot of time just to discuss the benefits of media self-regulation, because we all know them. That they can be an alternative to courts of justice, that they can promote media quality, restore the public trust, and so it is an additional way of protecting media freedom, and it is a shield. And in this respect, at UNESCO now, we promote the work of Press Council in Southeast Europe with the European Commission, with different programs, because we are very sure that this mechanism can be a shield for journalists. And we have brought colleagues here, and so there is no doubt about that. But in my research, what I have done in the last 5 years, it was a bit of a strange work, because when I studied it, I was at the OSCE, and I just arrived and I didn't have a clue about media self-regulation. And I discovered, okay, there was this cartoons crisis, and the reaction of the government was to try to regulate this issue, or at least there were some discussions, should we regulate more media freedom or not? So that's when we started to work on self-regulation, just to promote this issue as an alternative to media regulation. Not as a replacement, but at least as an alternative. And then I was wondering, but why, what are the benefits for media freedom? So I spent a lot of time doing all these things, trying to define how it helps journalists to defend themselves. But what was really interesting was that, as well, I discovered during my research that there is some pitfalls to self-regulation as well, and that we should still all be aware of them in order to better protect journalists. And I have to say that the main thing is that you can divide these pitfalls of self-regulation in two sides. That, let's say, in less democratic country, or like in countries in transition, promoting self-regulation carries a bit of a risk that it's going to be misused by government themselves. And this I have seen, that governments, that I don't want to say, but they're governments that are willing to promote self-regulation because for them it's a very convenient way of setting, in a very subtle manner, a kind of a self-censorship. That's very easy. It's more easy than media law, it's less obvious. So there is this, it's always kind of a risk. And then in Western, and let's say, because I was in Europe, so let's say in old established democracies, I could see that another risk right now, and this was discussed last year, is the fact that courts of justice are now referring sometimes more and more to the work of Press Council. And there is no clear, how to say, It's very difficult to, the relationship between the justice courts and the press council is a very complicated one. I think no one here has a perfect solution, and I've spent some time trying to see what is the justice court doing, what is the press council doing, because now a lot of courts of justice have started to, when I was listening to you, to refer to judgment of press council or people that have their cases judged in court, judged in the press council, they try to use it in the court afterwards. And this, if in some country, it's not so bad, because let's say that in less democratic countries, the courts of justice are maybe not so much in favor of media freedom. If they use what the press council is doing, that's great. But in other countries, where ethical codes must be much more restrictive, then it carries still a risk that then the media freedom become meritorious freedom. That you, as a journalist, you're going to be defended only if you respect ethical standards, which is the question. I mean, this, do we want that? Like, that's, and one of the last questions of my work was the fact that now with the internet, and it's a bit different, but the fact that in the internet era, we cannot regulate all the internet content. And actually, a lot of the content regulation now is given to internet service providers. And what is the thing? What is the democratic quality of this? Should we better trust private institutions, or should we better trust elected democratic with value, like with the Court of Justice behind to guarantee that there is a democratic standard, or should we rather trust private institutions to actually decide what should be the standards regarding media freedom? And this is also a question which is going to come more and more, because actually with the development of the internet, it's something like always growing. I hope I'm not too long, sorry.
No, it's okay. This was, I think, also a great introduction. We got a kind of a roadmap to the issue, and now perhaps we can go to the specifics. And Nachman, I think that if you, from your experience, both as a journalist, as a regulator, and as a legislator, what do you think the Israeli experience proves? We have a press council. We have, of course, laws protecting the media in our legal system, in our constitutional system, and yet, of course, we have also our many problems. What do you think the Israeli experience proves?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
I don't know about laws protecting the media.
You know what? Neither do I.
Well, we have rulings. We have rulings.
Here is
We have the court, but
No,
not
you're right.
laws.
You're right.
Nachman.
So Judge Dolan gave the answer, and I can continue to nap a little bit. No, because we have a certain argument between us. I'm
It's
trying.
a pity that we don't, but we don't.
What? I think you.
No, we don't have laws protecting the
Laws
media.
No, it
Not-
should
nothing
be.
to do with it.
Well, that's what I believe in, by the way. But lately, since I was wondering what will I start with, I remember that during the 1999 war, most of it was fought in this hotel. I mean, some of it, because the missiles were coming from there or there, and the media was standing.
91, you mean? Yeah.
91. What did I say?
99.
No, 91. And the media was stationed in the 16th floor here and watching the scene. And here comes the dilemma, should we exercise military censorship in order to limit the freedom of operation and movement of the media, do not let them move around, and especially take pictures where missiles landed. And the military censorship was very eager to issue this order. So the chief of military intelligence at the time was Lieutenant General Amnon Shachar, late Amnon Shachar, very wise man. And he said, no, I don't want to use this power I have. And he had the power. He said, let's call the media and consult with them what to do. And that meeting took place 5 meters from here in the second hall. He called them in and he said, guys, we have an issue. We can just stop this freedom we have given you, and you will have to do whatever we ask you. And this is the law in Israel, the law from the mandate, British mandate, but this is the law currently. Or if you voluntarily agree that there'll be some officer standing next to you while you continue your broadcast, live broadcast from Israel, We were not used to live broadcast because this was the beginning of the live broadcast era. And you can do and say whatever you want, but just be aware that there's certain information, and our guys will tell you momentarily, in a moment, what is allowed to say and what is not allowed to say. You'll continue the flow of your broadcast, but then you will have to be careful what you say. So just tell us what you prefer. And of course the answer was, let us do our work, and we will watch carefully what you told us. And so this is a case where the media choose a kind of self-restraint. They choose to do their job, which was absolutely correct in my view. At the same time, the authorities, in this case the military authorities, showed some flexibility. Instead of being tough, what you expect from a military to be, they said, okay, let's show some understanding to the needs of the media, because all this war, the 1991 war, was covered live from all over the Middle East, so it should be done from Israel too, but be aware of the certain sensitivity of us, that when we report, or you report, where missiles, yes, at the time there were missiles, landing in Israel, we don't want the enemy, I mean it was Iraq at the time, to know where the missile landed, so next time they will be able to correct it if it didn't fall in the right place. So this is a case, coming back to you, I mean, first of all, we need wisdom, okay? Forget about what's better and what's worse. Wisdom, wise people to be in charge. Now I'm going to the question of what's, in my view, the way to protect media, or freedom of the media. We are not the only players in this game. I mean, those who would like to have a freedom of the media in Israel. There are other players that are not very happy that media is free. They said it's too free. They said sometimes Israel is too democratic. I'm sure you heard this. And so I believe Israel is not too democratic, it's a democracy. But even in a democracy, we should have a certain attitude to the media to let the media do their job, their mission, their role in a free society. So what I identified in the past, and I guess my colleagues here from Israel know that very well, that there is a certain tendency in the Knesset, mainly in the coalition in the Knesset, in the government, within some Knesset members, to impose certain laws on the media that will curb, will limit the freedom of the media in Israel.
Do they care at all if we regulate ourselves? Those factors within Israeli politics, within Israeli public discourse, within the body of Israeli democracy.
No.
Are they at all sensitive question as to what extent are we self-regulating ourselves? Do they care?
No, they won't accept it. Pardon?
I will give you one example, perhaps Nachman will have another one. For instance, to statutory ascertain, for instance, a law to statutory ascertain a limit, a baseline of damages that will be ruled in a libel suit with no proof of damage, for instance. Okay? Other not so democratic.
Forcing a newspaper to publish a retraction if they didn't give the offended party a chance to respond.
Increasing the fine if you do not fill this law, or you violate the law, the fine went up from 50,000 shekels to 300,000 shekels. So it will just scare the media from not touching some...
Now we have to say, in fairness, that none of those statutes eventually were passed.
Okay, this is the point.
We have to say that in fairness.
Yeah, this is the point. That's what I'm saying. Okay, you play to my hands.
Sorry.
That's what I'm saying. No, that's fine. I guess it's better when it comes from you. Because we launched a war, a kind of parliamentary war is a bad word in Israel because we use it too frequently. But a kind of parliamentary struggle against it. Once we identify the direction, once you know where the enemy is and what's the strategy, then you know how to defend and how to work against it. And that's exactly what we did. We stopped them, not by ourselves only. The media helped us, the press council helped us. We had some external powers out of the parliament, because in the parliament we are still a minority. Not for a long time, maybe for 10, 20 years, but we are still a minority. But out of the Knesset, out of the parliament, I think that there is a certain out-of-parliament powers that can come and help us, and that's exactly what you did in those cases, and those attempts were failed and were stopped. So that's why I suggested, and I keep expressing my view wherever I can, that we should take the initiative, and we should pass a certain legislation that will protect and defend the media and avoid those attempts, from the other side.
Didier, what is it with the French people that they oppose so much the idea of a press council?
That's a very simple question, but the answer is complicated. So I have some picture to help me. Just a second. So, you know, the French people are sometimes very strange, even for me, who was born in Paris, but not only because we are supposed to eat frogs, or that's not true, or because our president wants to bomb Syria. We have, yeah, but okay. So, coming? It will be more
It's like the bombing on Syria. It's coming very slowly. Very slowly.
Yes, that's it. There. Okay, you know this guy.
Yes.
That's a very strange question, because he should be president of France now. And he committed a political sexual suicide. So you remember this picture.
Yes.
In the newspaper Le Monde, it was like that. DSK walking with two friends. You see the difference between the two pictures? They simply cut the bottom of the picture, and there is a reason for that. The reason is this law. It's the law of year 2000, which it's in French because someone here in the public wants to practice her French. But the words are very the same. You can't broadcast or print the image of a person, a public person or simple person, who is accused of a crime, but not condemned. And you can't show the person with handcuffs or in a situation which shows that he is under custody. That's the law. And this law is part of a bigger law, our very famous law of 1881 of what we call the French press law. This is the last version. It's from August this year. This is the first page, the official first page. It says that the printing and selling of printed objects is free in France. The first point is the secret of sources, protection, the protection of secret of sources. And you see the last part is the definition of what is a journalist. You know what is a journalist in France? A journalist, it's written in the law. It's very strange. A journalist is someone working in a journal. That's the definition.
Even the bellboy.
Oh, yes. No, working as a journalist. A journalist is someone working as a journalist. Okay? That helps very much. We have another definition, another law of 1935, which defines a journalist as someone who gets the main part of his revenue from journalism. So it's the publisher who gives him a letter that he earns a salary as a journalist. And you get from a commission which are made of elected people, elected by journalists, you got a press card with a nice French flag. I remember when I was a journalist in Israel, I had a press card, but it was government press office. It's a difference. You know? It's an independent account. So this law, which was voted after the Second Empire, it was at the beginning of the Third Republic. So it was known as a journalist-friendly law, but it's not always like that. So what happens, for example, 5 years ago, demonstration, what is written here, casse-toi pauvre con, in French, it's very rude. I translate it, it's a fuck off asshole. And this sentence was taken from President Sarkozy when he visited the agriculture fair in 2008. He wanted to shake hands with someone, and the someone refused. And he told him, casse-toi pauvre con. So the people who were demonstrating, they took the sentence of Sarkozy and put it on the demonstration. The result is that Mr. Hervé Héon, who had such a paper, was prosecuted by the public prosecutor for insulting the President of the Republic. It's a law. It's forbidden in France to insult the President of the Republic. It's in our freedom law, freedom of press law. So the prosecutor asked for a 1,000 euro fine. The judge, who knows the situation, and generally the judges in France try to protect the freedom of expression. The judge, he has to give a fine because it is a law, so he gave 30 euro. The Court of Appeal upheld the decision. But Mr. Hervé Héon, who is a leftist militant, he said, I want the European Court to say that France is wrong. So he went to Strasbourg, and the European Court of Human Rights decided that the French president should not be overprotected against insulting statements, and they condemned France. The result of that, and that's, I show you the influence of Europe. One month ago, the French Parliament changed the law because of the European decision. Dans le cas d'injure ou diffamation, it's only if the President of the Republic is insulted, only he can go to court like every citizen. If you are insulted, you go to court and you suit for him. So that is a small taste of what is the French system of regulation, which is very old, and it has been amended more than 60 times during 130 years. So this is one of the answers. The journalists or the publishers say, but our system is so heavy, why do you want to add more limitation?
So it is perceived that the option, the possibility of founding a press council is perceived as a dangerous extra limit on the press,
yes, yes.
And not necessarily as something which will reinforce the ethos, the tradition, and therefore perhaps the power of our profession?
We have one argument, one very strong argument for creating a press council. The citizen who has a problem with a newspaper has no redress, but the court. So he has to be rich. He has to take a lawyer and go to court. And the simple citizen has no address to go. I have been an ombudsman at the French public TV, and I know that many very simple people have criticism and have very bright things to say. So this is one argument, to give the public an address to criticize, and the possibility to criticize the media. Now with the crisis, many journalists feel that their credibility is very low, almost at the same level than politicians, which is very bad. Even worse than policemen. This is very, very bad. This is a very good argument for yes. So the last good news is that the main union of journalists in France, Syndicat National des Journalistes, has voted last year a decision. They want to build a new body, ethical body, in France, which is linked to the commission which gives the press card, which is an elected body of journalists. We, in my association, that is trying to convince French people and French journalists to build a real press council, we want not only journalists, we want the publishers. The publishers are against. They don't want to hear about it. We can't even speak to them by telephone. They don't take us. I can't speak to them. I can speak with the minister of...
This will be problematic in terms of economics?
Yes, because we are very simple people in France. Some of our big owners are not press people. There is a big bank, for example, Le Crédit Mutuel. It houses many local newspapers, but their aim is not journalistic ethics. They don't want to sell ethics. They sell advertisement. They sell paper. And journalists, they would like to make newspapers without journalists. And they tried once. You know, that is a problem. The main problem nowadays is the owner and publishers of newspapers. The journalists are beginning to understand that one of the solutions of the crisis may be that solution of the press council.
Thank you very much, Didier. I would like to open the floor a little bit here and to present an example, because I'm still with Lorena's story of the crisis they experienced in terms of the media treatment of this clause that you introduced. And it reminds me of an example which comes to mind that I think exemplifies our experience, or at least that's the first example that comes to my mind. It has to do with a publication following the WikiLeaks scandal. And in our most important newspaper, Haaretz, which is kind of the Israeli New York Times, there was a publication concerning the leader of the Settlements Council, a leader from the right wing in Israel, a young, intelligent person who happens to be my cousin. And there was a publication about him, blaming him. The WikiLeaks information was blaming him for saying one thing within closed doors to the American ambassador and the American consul and American envoys that he was meeting here in Israel, telling them that some settlements should be evacuated and then that some settlers are too violent and aggressive with regard to Palestinians. And another thing in open doors, when he's publicly addressing his own constituency, of course he's speaking differently about the future of the settlements, etc. This was the story in WikiLeaks. And the WikiLeaks material was kind of transpiring the story of the inside and the closed-door conversations that he had with the Americans. He went to the court of the Israeli Press Council, the ethics court of the Israeli Press Council, claiming, A, that the quotes were not correct, B, that they were taken out of context, like politicians like to say, C, that the headline was not in synchronization with the text, and he won. And he won. And Haaretz did something which they really seldom do. They didn't recognize that they were right, but they published a correction. And this was for me a very, very, very unique example, because it doesn't often happen. Bear in mind that it was not the classical suit. It was not the case where he could say, you lied. It was not the case where he could say, you were liable. It was not the case in which he could say that there was defamation, right? It was something much more subtle, much more complex and complicated. Things were taken out of context. I was lit in a very specific kind of light. And my question, and here I would like to open it to the floor, is there a possibility to replace this kind of mechanism with a statutory-based system? And on the other hand, do we journalists don't want this kind of subtle, more complicated regulation? As Didier just quoted the French experience, they simply don't want it. Is it something that we should aspire to, or is it something that we should resent? Please.
Sufficiently committed anymore to this. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they've just given up on the idea. Maybe they are disheartened by the fact that only a few mainstream outlets remain members while this news jungle is out there doing whatever they like. But in any case, I think if they abandon this, the parliaments are waiting. There's no vacuum in nature. It's not going to happen. We cannot expect the only profession that can effectively kill people to be unregulated, to be the press. It's not going to happen. Nobody will allow it to happen. So we need to, perhaps we need a compromise between the two extremes.
Could I ask a question about that Harrod's case? It's not clear to me on what grounds did the Israeli Press Council uphold the complaint by this person against the newspaper?
For starters, well, since I was involved, for starters, he was not given a chance to comment.
Oh, on those grounds only? So
Well, no, not really. I mean, there were other subtleties, but that was the main thing we hung him on. We hung the paper on. And this was, they went and appealed against it and still lost the case.
And the implication of that is that if they had given him an opportunity to comment.
Not only that, because Arik is right that this was very clear. This is something on which you don't have to, to have too much commentary. Either they gave him a right to reply or not, but there was also something else. He could prove that in many, many public occasions, he said simply the same thing. So there was no cause
to call him a liar,
indicting him of hypocrisy. And here you see, this is something which can never go to court. This is something which you can never, the court will never be the right forum to discuss things of ethics, of the way you light somebody, which light do you light him, how do you portray him. These are much more subtle, and this is why I was so much impressed by this episode. And I wonder again, do we as journalists don't want to invite this kind of discourse, this kind of self-reflection? But one should bear in mind, this kind of self-reflection is interesting only if it has teeth. And once it has teeth, come Didier's friends and don't want it. You wanted to make a remark?
Just 1 second.
We have not got Susie Nabot, so
Unfortunately.
I replace her. Talking about the law, you must understand that there is a difference between the law, who states what is forbidden and what you can do, and between ethics. Ethics is not the law. It's what it should be done. It's ethics. There is no profession without ethics. It can't work without ethics. Not everybody abides by his ethics. It's a normal, because people don't abide. They don't abide by the law, they don't abide by the ethics. But we must have a code of ethics. Even in France, you can't work with, a journalist cannot work with such ethics. He will be an advertiser, as you told me. That's not a journalist, that's not his profession. So what do? If you have ethics, you must enforce it. In a loose way, because you must, self-regulation, you don't want your parliament telling you how your ethics will be, and parliaments and governments don't like, most of the, we'll say parliaments, anyway, governments don't like too much the critics of the journalists. So that's the problem we have got. By the way, I must tell you about our justice minister that when there was a proposal, a law that was purely an ethic question, asked us to give this point
in the code.
In the code, and we didn't have to, because the code we had they covered it. The court covered it, but just to let loose, and this proposal was really ridiculous. And Neiman asked us, so we changed our code. But that's a problem. You can't live without ethics. So what do you do about it?
Just, Adeline was waiting with a remark. I will just apologize that Justice Dorner just mentioned her. Professor Suzy Navot, who was supposed to be with us. She's one of the most prominent constitutional scholars in Israel, dealt a lot with freedom of speech issues and other issues, but unfortunately she doesn't feel well, and struck by a virus.
I'd like, let us say, to see there are things that I'd like to have a law, the protection of the source. But I'm afraid that if there will be a proposal, what will be the end of this proposal?
Right.
So I know that there was proposals and they were rejected by the Knesset, but what we fear that such proposals will begin with A and finish with C at the end will be not a good thing. So it's much, we are much safer with the Supreme Court defending the sources.
No, I just wanted to say in the end that it's all just a question of journalistic culture and the history of the political regime in the end. Because this you cannot change. What is in France is just the proof that if you actually don't have media like self-regulation developed, then instead you have a lot of media laws. And then it's very difficult to come back to that because this is the tradition of France, and it's, to change it will take time. And I hope they manage, but it's something difficult. Whereas in Britain, it was from the beginning, they never trust the authorities as a guarantor for media freedom. So they always went for, by principle, there should be media ethics and you should not involve the authorities. So it's just a culture, and we have here a very good example of a statutory self-regulatory mechanism which works very well in Denmark. And it's for, I mean, I don't know if he wants to share, but we had this discussion last year at the AIPC. He was explaining how it's working, and it's working there. It's just the question of the culture.
Nachman, you want to say something? We do in a second.
I want to respond to you, Judge Dorner. When we started commercial and radio, commercial television and commercial radio in Israel after 1991, 1993, we faced the same dilemma because from the beginning it was clear it will have a private ownership, but at the same time it will act in the public sphere. It's not a private business. And of course, there was always a question of competition. How many channels or how many sources will be finally in the air? So we choose to transfer certain issues of ethics into a law. They were included in the second television radio law, which was finally passed by the Knesset. And the Israeli public authority, which has radio and television too, has no such commitments, legal commitments, as the so-called private television and radio in Israel. So why was it done? Because the Israeli Television and Radio Authority started many years before, and no one wanted to touch the law of Israel Television and Radio, because they said, no, don't touch, because we know how it starts, we don't know how it ends. This is the principle. But in this case, we knew how it started.
Sometimes it succeeds.
Right, and we had a full control on the process. So, yeah, I know, I agree with you. You know, we have many discussions about that in the past. Right, and so when we had a full control on the process from the very beginning till the end, we did decide to have a certain code of ethics being given a status of law. And if you violate that in your broadcast, you may sue by whoever.
Maybe persecuted.
Right.
Didier, and then a short remark from the floor.
About protection of sources, you saw that it is in the law in France. And when the journalists wanted to protect their sources, they went to the government and they asked for a law. So they have a new law, which is not bad, and which is necessary when the journalist is in court and when the judge asks him, what was your source? So he's entitled to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't, and it's okay with the law. So sometimes the law is useful. A second example is a defamation law, the French defamation law. It's very journalist friendly because when you are attacked, when you have a libel, you don't have to prove the truth of your accusation. The French judges invented a good faith. What is good faith? You did a good journalistic work, no animosity, serious investigation, moderate, I think, caution, moderate expression, and that is enough for the judge to let the journalist quiet. That's two very good examples. There are very bad examples of the use of law. For example, prosecutors who they don't get the source, so they accuse a journalist of complicity. For example, a journalist was at a press conference of an underground movement in Corsica. They want to know who was, they are masked. And the journalist say, no, I'm a journalist, I don't give my sources. So the prosecutor says, you were there, they have confidence in you, so you are one of them. And there were 5 such cases of prosecutor trying to get people, to get sources by this way.
It's interesting speaking about the protection of sources, and then another example comes to my mind, which again goes to what Justice Dorner was just saying about ethics always having to be a supplement to the legal situation. I had an encounter, I guess it was 4 years ago, with the prosecutors of our president who unfortunately is in jail for rape, the ex-president of the State of Israel. And I was invited to testify because one of the women who filed the complaint met me in a drugstore in Jerusalem a couple of years earlier, before she said anything about what happened to her with this guy. And she said just something very general about him molesting women. She didn't want to disclose her name or her telephone number, but that's all she said. Later on, when the whole scandal exploded, she signed a waiver of her rights as a source of mine. And she said to the police, it is okay, you can go ahead and ask her about this meeting that we had in the drugstore, and it's okay for me that she tells you about it. And so I did. But then when the prosecutors invited me to a meeting to prepare me for the testimony, all of a sudden they started asking me, did you meet her later on? Because later on I covered the scandal. And of course I did meet her, but I realized that I'm not supposed to tell them about it. This has nothing to do with the meeting in the drugstore. And, but spontaneously I said, yes, I did, which I shouldn't have. I said, yes, I did. And then the prosecutor was kind enough to tell me she's a very fine lady, and she said, you bear in mind that everything you say here will later be part of your investigation in court. And I said, listen, Ronit, I'm sorry. I don't work for you guys, and I'm not supposed to tell you anything other than what happened in the drugstore. And I'm not going to tell you if I met her, because then her assistant asked me, did you record her? And if you have such recording, can we have it? It is tremendously important for us to prove consistency of her version, of her testimony. And I said, listen guys, no, we are off track here. I'm not working at your service, and I'm not going to tell you anything about my communication with this lady, and whether I met her or recorded her or whatnot. And then the prosecutor told me, listen Ilana, we can have her sign anything. She will sign any waiver that we ask her to sign. And I said, this is precisely the reason why I will not tell you anything, even if she signs. And there goes the ethics. Suppose she signs, legally I'm okay. If she waives her immunity, legally I'm okay. And
You're obliged to testify.
But Arik, my sense was, and this is perhaps an issue for another discussion, my sense was that I'm not supposed to tell anything, not for her sake, but for the sake of the next one. And this has nothing to do with law, but it has to do with ethics. Please.
Because I'm so short, I'll stand up for a moment. We had a Press Freedom Commission in South Africa last year, the ANC, African National Congress, wanted to bring in a media appeals tribunal because they said, where do we go? We already had an appeal structure, everything was fine. But what is interesting, even in apartheid times we had advertising was run by themselves, the press was run by itself, a lot of pressure from the apartheid government, they had to work it, ask Eric, he was there. And then the broadcasters also have that. That's where I'm the chairman. But suddenly, the African National Congress said, we want an appeals tribunal. Where do you go, you know? So the plan was the following, and I'll do it quickly. Get the ex-Chief Justice of the country, who happens to be ANC, to chair it. Get even the Archbishop of Cape Town, not the one whose picture I showed yesterday, the new one, not Bishop Tutu, but Ntolwa. And prominent people to sit, I would be their legal advisor. And what we did then, we allowed increased membership of the public, increased accessibility, better protection of the right to reply, and wonderful, like, was it Virgilius who said, too wonderful to say, the ANC accepted it. That's what they said. We couldn't believe it. And so there's a larger public participation. On sources, we succeeded when I was the chair of the Press Council in 1992, already convincing the apartheid government that only the judge will decide it. Luckily, the judges are wise, and the last time that this was mentioned, I know someone went to jail for a while, didn't want to reveal the sources. A very clever, wise judge said, no, it'll endanger this journalist if this journalist gives the sources. That's the last decision, 1993. So I wish there was an absolute protection, but some good news from the South. We, yes, but the accessibility is important and the public participation, we pushed that up. And somehow, hell, they seem to be very happy for the time being. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. You know, when I'm listening to you, I figure, you know, if only the judges are wise, the journalists are professional, and the legislators are restrained, we are all fine. That's all I mean. Just a short remark. Yeah, right.
Well, I just wanted to say, when talking about media law, I seriously believe that you always need basic media laws to defend media freedom, because you cannot just rely on press council. And actually, press council, this was one of the outcome of the research as well. When I asked questioners, is it part of your statute to defend media freedom? Surprisingly, a lot of press council told me no. It's part of them, like in Germany, they have as a object, if I'm not wrong, but they do defend press freedom. But in some other, they say no, actually, because they believe that it could be in contradiction with the interest of defending the interest of the civil society, and not that they don't want to be always defending the journalists, that they should be, so they have different perspective in this.
Just 1 second, Lydia. There was someone from the floor here. Yes, and I have been with
Yes. If I could just, I think on the protection of sources.
Yes.
I have a problem, and I think perhaps it's time to say something unpopular. I don't necessarily agree with this position, but I think it's important to voice it. And the problem is that, and I was very interested that Lorena said that she was surprised that in so many countries of the European Union there is not a protection of sources law. I think we have to accept and admit that there is a tension between the protection of journalists and the administration of justice in certain cases. And I wonder whether the only obvious answer to this is the protection of journalists. Because the question is raised whether, I mean, we've been talking earlier today and during this conference about the difficulty of saying who is a journalist. Frankly, if I were a judge, I would prefer to make a decision about the protection of an individual who has disclosed information on the basis of the public interest value of the disclosure of that information rather than on the legal status of the individual. I am a journalist, I'm also a Democrat. I believe that the extension of special privileges to any group in society has to be tested and tested and tested again to see if there is not a better way of achieving the same objective.
Yeah, I think this is a fair remark. Didier, you wanted to say something then, Lorena?
Yes, just a point about protection of sources. The law in France is not total. The protection is not total. You have many cases where the protection falls, for example, defense matters.
Lorena, please.
Yeah, well, the conversation has moved into protection of sources. I was going to make the same comment as Didier, that you always have the public security exception, and all the cases now in the UK show also how some countries are using that exception. But my comment was more following the remark of Nachman, and this dichotomy we have in the legislation for audiovisual and no legislation for the press, and then you have something kind of in the middle for online audiovisual content with editorial content where there is legislation but it's softer. And we are all saying, well, let's not touch anything because you never know. And it's an argument we always hear also in the Commission. Don't do anything because who knows if it goes to the Parliament what these crazy people could say. And there's always this fear to change. But I wonder how long this can stay. Because right now, and we are in the Commission making this reflection, because of the convergence work. It was justified, it has been always justified to have legislation for audiovisual because there was a scarcity of resources, so you had to license, so you have to, in a way, legislate because of it was considered that there was a bigger impact because you were in the living room of the people. Now with the internet and the convergence, you have, in the same screen, you have television content that is fully regulated. With connected TV, you have on the other side of the screen sometimes video on demand, which is lighter regulated. You may have even a screen of a website with a newspaper, which is not regulated, not legislated, let's say, and you can have social media, which is the Wild West. All that on the same screen at the same time in your living room. So I wonder how long will it stand that everything is following a completely different standard. And what is a mystery is to know who is going to influence what. Does it mean we will move all to more self-regulation? Does it mean there will be some minimum? That's a debate we are having right now in the Commission because we are reviewing our directive on audiovisual. So we have launched a public consultation precisely to wonder how are we going to deal in the future with these type of situations.
No, the only thing that I wonder is, with all due respect to the explosion of information and social media and the kind that our screens are split and our attention is divided, is it not the case that people will always need somebody to make sense of it all? And as long as they do we not need to do it professional? And if we do we not need an ethic code to do it right? But I guess the moment I say it, it's already obsolete. So. If there is one more remark that anybody would like to add or contribute, if not, then I'll just end by saying I'm sure that Justice Dorner remembers him. It was one of our greatest jurists, a criminal law jurist, who wrote that a written constitution is like a lock on the door. The thief will be able to break in through it even if it is the heaviest and the best of locks. And the honest person will stay out even if there is no law. So I guess it is also true for press regulation, for self-regulation. Still people lock most doors, and still we should keep searching for the best, modest, which will help us keep the press professional, honest, and most importantly, free. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful, thank you. Well, as we say, time flies when we're having fun. Don't forget, glasses here?
Oh,
Okay. We have one more item on the agenda, and that is to decide if we want to meet next year again and where. We well know that we have one proposal on the table from our friends from Korea, who've made quite an effort to come here in strength and have graciously offered to host us. Is there any other member council that would like to make a proposal? Because our friends from, sorry Dominic, in a minute, our friends from Korea would like to do a very short presentation of their proposal, but Dominic, you first.
Yeah, I just wanted to explain why last year we said Switzerland would be ready to host the next meeting, and I want to explain why we don't renew the invitation.
Okay.
The reason is a very practical one, is that Martin Kunze, our secretary, is leaving us by the end of the year. He was elected by us to public office, and so we have to replace him. So it's going to be a year of transition, and we felt it was not very responsible to take on one more task.
Okay, that's fine. So may I ask our friends from Korea? Yes, sorry. Yes, to do the presentation. Yep, go ahead. In about 5 minutes we'll have our coffee and we will conclude this session. Thank you. The what?
Switch off a coffee. Just
To switch off what?
Yeah, switch off. Because I see the space.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Okay, focus the screen, please.
Thank you.
Anyways,
sorry, yeah. One more minute, yeah.
Hello, I'm Seong-Hong from Korea. I'm a professor of journalism and working as an arbitrator in Korea Press Arbitration Commission. I'm so glad to meet you here, the scholars and experts of press councils all over the world. It is a great pleasure to join the annual conference of European Press Councils as an Asian organization. Korea Press Arbitration Commission is an organization established in 1981. We are an alternative dispute resolution organization based on the Article 7 of the Act on Press Arbitration and Remedies, etc., for damage caused by the press reports. The arbitration tribunal is composed of the 5 members to enhance the professionalism and impartiality. A judge in active service, a lawyer, a former journalist with more than 10 years experiences, and journalism scholars consist the arbitration tribunal. This tells our efforts to keep rational and neutral judgment with both legal and journalistic perspectives. Well, now I'd like to tell you Korea PAC eagerly hope to host the 16th annual AIPC conference in Seoul. It will be a great honor. If you come and see such unique systems of Korea for resolving press disputes, I think it will help AIPCE find out more efficient methods of settling media-caused disputes. Complimentary accommodations, meals, and sightseeing tours will be provided. You will have unforgettable cultural experiences in Korea. I hope we will see you in Seoul next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, friends. It's really up to the audience, this distinguished audience. What do you want to do? Oh. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. I know there were some reservations, which in fact, Daphne, we had some reservations starting from Antwerp because this esteemed organization, which is a fairly loose alliance, has started developing an identity crisis. I can't blame them. You've taken an Israeli member on board, you would do anything, I guess. But so you need to decide. You need to decide, and unless there's any other alternate proposal, yeah, Mark. Yes.
I will take the mic.
Can you? Yeah, you need the mic.
Shall I come there? Well,
no, just yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have another proposition. We all would like to go to Korea. Why not to visit Korea? I would be pleased. But for the next meeting of our alliance, I come with a proposal of our press council, French-speaking press council in Belgium. At this stage, it's a proposal. It has to be confirmed. But the idea would be to meet next year in Brussels. You know Brussels. It's not such a surprise. But in this case, we would have, we hope, the help, the logistical help of the European Commission, and also the help of our colleagues from Vienna, from the Austrian Press Council, to invite all European countries, all the European councils in all Europe, even new European countries, to join the meeting. So I could confirm it in a few days before the end of the month, but I can tell you, you would be very welcome in Brussels.
So does that, yes, Alex.
I think it's a very good proposal, and I think also the Korean one is a nice one, of course, but maybe it would be better if the Korean delegation organizes an international conference on the topic and invites all the members of the AIPCE. I'm sure that there are many of us willing to go there and visiting this beautiful country, but as Arik said, we are in a bit of a crisis of identity, and we should think of our own future, and we should bring in order the European situation first. It's maybe a very good idea to have a working session, so we would rather focus on working groups, so it's more internal next year in Brussels, and there wouldn't be any big panels. And as I've said, the conference 2015, I've announced that already last year, will probably be held in Vienna if you agree to it. And in Vienna, maybe the situation will be already a bit clearer, and we could continue with a broader audience and with panels again. So I fully support the proposal by Marik, and I think Korea could do an international conference, so we could have 2 events maybe next year.
Okay, Mark, I understand that we have to wait, we have to defer a decision basically.
Yeah, it's a question of principle.
Yeah, no problem.
I did not come here with a mandate to make officially a proposal, but I know what I say, so it's not fantasy, but I will go to the board, but I will add something else. It will be next year the 5th anniversary of our council, which has been very successful. We have a lot of things to tell you, to show you. This is one point. And the other point, you know, Benjamin speaks 2 or even more 3 languages. Our friends from the Flemish committee welcomed you last year in Antwerp for their 10th anniversary, so they have already a good experience in organizing such a meeting. They will for sure help us to organize it.
We can always learn a lot from the Belgians. I mean, this is one country that's been run without a government for, how long was it? That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, so that means we do not take any decisions on that, and we decide by correspondence, say, within a couple of weeks.
Excuse me.
Fair enough?
Can I have one more explanation from the perspective of Korea?
Say again?
Can I have some remarks?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yes, South Korea is located in Asia, but not in Europe, but some European countries such as the South Africa and the United States are joining this conference, and I heard that last year the Pakistan and the Sri Lanka also joined this conference. Yeah, I think if we would host the next year's conference in Seoul, that would be a chance to see the press councils from the perspective of the global idea. We also want to invite the Japanese councils, and we'll also try to some contact with China and other Asian countries. That may be, in reality, it would be the global conferences. So we would like to, we know you are concerned, but we would like to every effort to qualify your idea.
No, that's clearly noted. Yes, yes, Daphne, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I would like to remark that, as I see it, the tendency from countries without Europe, they are most welcome to attend, but being an observer. And for now, we consider it more an alliance within Europe. We are very, it is very nice for people outside Europe, countries outside Europe, to think that they can organize this. But for now, I think it is too soon, and maybe we can think about it next year when we discuss how to work within the alliance, the future of the alliance. Okay. But for me, it is too soon to go outside Europe.
Well, let's not waste too much more of the sunshine out there. Let's decide that until Belgium has firmed it up, would put everything on hold, right? And we meet again over the internet in say 10, 14 days, and we'll know. Maybe if you decide that you can't do it next year, then we'll decide we're not going to meet next year. That's fine. That's also an option, right? But and we shall seek other ways of accepting the. Okay, just a few things left now, and this is time for thank yous.
Eric,
yeah.
Just a short note. I think we should say thank you to South Korea for making this offer. I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you, President Obama, for not blowing this conference to Kingdom Come. Thank you for the new Israel Fund, our sponsors, and the School of Communication at IDC Herzliya, and the Israel Democracy Institute. Without them, this would have not, I barely managed to pay the rent at the end of the month for our small offices, certainly not to host this. To our dedicated production staff of the Kenes Israel group, headed by Liat and Chen, they've been wonderful. And finally, to our content team, Tehila Schwartz, Al Shola, you've met her, Chanoch Marmari, Noam Lemel-Streich-Latar, Yuval Yoaz, Anat Peleg, Itzik Shanan, and Moti Rosenblum, who have given us such a wonderful and educational program. 2 points of order. Remember, those of you who you would like to be dropped off at Ben Gurion Airport tomorrow must be by the, in the lobby by 7:45 with their suitcases, checked out of their rooms. You've got my phone number at the back, at the penultimate page of this program. Keep it with you until you're safely out of this country, because as Leila will tell you, this country, if you look up plane hijackings in the Oxford Dictionary, you'll see a small photo of an El Al plane. I mean, plane hijackings were invented for this country. This is why there's so much security concerns. So, keep the numbers. If you run into any problems, call me at any time. That's it. This evening we shall say goodbye, some of us, by the poolside with a barbecue. The way to is just, you have to come out. The smokers will know the way. Just go into the pool and you'll see us all. 7:30. So thank you very much for coming, and see you this evening.
Okay. I take the position of Bob. We are very sorry that Bob Pinker isn't here, because it was the honor of the British elderly, wiser man to say thank you to the organization. Since they're not here anymore, I don't know why, but I take this opportunity to.
Yeah. I always prefer a young, beautiful woman.
But I would like to say thank you very much, Arik, Daria, the staff of the Israeli Council for do such a good job, and as a well-organized conference for our alliance. And well, we see each other more next to the pool. But give them a
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.